Yeah, well, we're going to get to this, but it is amazing how sanguine Western feminists are around this practice. Like, this is just another culture's ideal of how to honor feminine beauty and empower women. Who are we to criticize it? We should differentiate the hijab from the niqab. The hijab is just a straight up symbol of female empowerment now in the West, right? I mean, despite
Yeah.
your best efforts on Twitter, it is just amazing to see what is being done with this. And we have, in the aftermath of the Christchurch massacre, the Prime Minister of New Zealand puts it on as the only possible show of respect for the community. Like, there's just no other way to express solidarity but to don this symbol. And we have got Linda Sarsour, organizing the Women's March. And there's so many examples of this. For some reason, people, one, can't see that most of the women on earth right now who are wearing a hijab are not doing it based on some empowerment they felt at an Ivy League institution where they're just going to take the male gaze off them at their own discretion. So they're forced to do it. The consequences of not doing it in many cases are, if not absolutely coercive social pressure, it's actually physical violence. But it is also just a step toward the niqab and the burqa, which are the actual crystallization of the ideal here that's being enshrined, which is it's all the female modesty is the only thing that safeguards male sexuality from completely running amok. It's like all men would be gropers and rapists,
Mhm.
but for the fact that women hide themselves.
Mhm.
Maybe we should jump into that now. I want to talk
Mhm.
about who your husband revealed himself to be, but what have your encounters with Western feminists been like?
Well, that makes me really sad that they consider Muslim women to be of some other species and that are so completely different from them. So for themselves, they will recognize all of those things that you talked about are basically victim blaming, slut shaming. They recognize those elements of rape culture when we're in the Western context, which are, they're much harder to see in the Western context.
Hmm.
But under Sharia, it's very, very easy to clearly see a perfect example of rape culture. But they somehow, when it's those women over there, it's empowering. Like, would it be empowering for you if you were told you have to wear this clothing in order to protect yourself from men who might rape you? Or you have to wear this clothing in order to be good and pure and go to heaven? Because if you don't wear it, then you're a filthy whore. Like, you wouldn't, no woman would want to hear that. No 7-year-old child would like to be told, you have to wear this in order to go to school. And your brother doesn't have to. He can wear whatever he wants, but you must wear this or you're not allowed to get educated. It is an atrocity. Like that's something that every human being should be upset about. And the fact that they think that it's okay for those humans over there, but not for us, is the part that really upsets me.
Yeah. And what do you do with the fact that you could go into any one of these cultures and find women who will say, I want to wear the niqab, I want to wear the burqa. Just take your colonial
Yeah.
bullshit elsewhere,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, of course there will be. And you can also go to fundamentalist Christian, cults, and they will tell you, I want to be a servant for my husband. You see people like that on Twitter all the time,
Hmm.
right? They're like, I quit my job and I cook and clean for my husband and I'm proud of it. And whatever it is, like women make all sorts of choices and decisions, and that's completely up to them and they're free to do that. But I'm also free to make a judgment on the decisions that they're making. So when I'm talking about the hijab as a symbol of patriarchy and a symbol of misogyny, I'm saying that because, as you mentioned, not only are girls coerced into it because of, family or government or religion, but girls can be killed because of this. And not
Yeah.
just in the Muslim world, but in Canada, in America, in France, in Sweden, there's honor violence and honor killing going on. A 16-year-old girl in Canada was strangled to death by her father and her brother with the hijab that she refused to wear.
Hmm.
And then her parents refused to bury her because they didn't want anything to do with her.
Students here at Applewood Heights Secondary School were expecting to have a half day of classes today, but certainly not expecting to be dealing with the death of one of their friends and classmates, 16-year-old Aqsa Parvez. The girl, police say, was murdered, and police believe she was murdered by her father. Police say it was her father, 57-year-old Mohammed Parvez, that made the 911 call saying that he had killed the 16-year-old early yesterday morning. Now, police will not comment on a motive in this case, but friends of the teenage girl said she was not happy at home and that the possible motive may have been the fact that she did not want to conform to her family's religious beliefs and may not have wanted to wear the hijab as per her family's wishes.
She wanted to be her own person. She wanted to show who she really was. She wanted to show her own, her own beauty, but he wanted her as, their culture, wanted her to wear Pakistani clothing, wearing the hijab and everything. She didn't want to do that.
There's so many stories around this. The one that sounds stranger than fiction is the case in Saudi
The
Arabia
school.
where the school was on fire and the religious police wouldn't let the fire department put it out because the girls weren't appropriately veiled.
Yeah.
And they're literally parents standing at the gates of the school watching their daughters burn alive. It's just,
And
it's
there are
absolutely
women that are
madness.
in Iran today that are being imprisoned for 15 years and more for refusing to wear this cloth on their head. So it's
Yeah.
not just, it's not just a benign choice. When the Prime Minister of New Zealand or when Meghan Markle put a hijab on their head, it's not just a benign support of some benign cultural thing. It is not just a symbol, but an actual tool of oppression. There are women being imprisoned and women being killed. There is a fight over this hijab going on right now. Women in Sudan, Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, they're burning their hijabs in the streets. They're fighting against this thing. And then to see free Western women leaders take this thing that they are fighting against and voluntarily donning it and supporting it, what those women are doing is they are supporting the oppressors. They are
Yeah.
supporting the oppressors that these women are fighting against.
Yeah, the double standard is so clear, and it really is sanity straining that it's so hard for people to see. So, like, the clearest case for me in the media was when, I don't know if you remember this, but Warren Jeffs, the leader of the FLDS, the fundamentalist Mormon cult, his compound was raided, and all these little girls and young women were led out in these little house on the prairie dresses, right? They were made to wear these awful 18th century dresses, and they had been married to men who were, their grandfather's ages, and these forced marriages were described as rapes, and the men were totally unrepentant. And Jeff's got, I think it's at least 15 years in prison. I forget,
Wow.
he got a real prison sentence. And this was all talked about on the news as just an unambiguous example of patriarchal exploitation of girls. The fact that it was associated with religious belief was not even slightly exculpatory. And everyone celebrated the fact that there was a SWAT team raid on the compound. We kicked in the door of this place to
To
free those
protect those
girls.
girls.
And it didn't matter at all that the girls didn't want to be freed. I
Yeah.
mean, we knew they had been brainwashed.
Yeah.
So when they're talking about how they loved their husband, four to a man or whatever it was, no one had any qualm discounting that for their obvious ignorance and brainwashing, right?
This was all prompted by an April 3rd raid. A caller to a family violence shelter, purportedly a 16-year-old girl on the ranch, said her 50-year-old husband beat and raped her. Authorities have scrutinized this polygamous community for creating an environment unsafe for children, one where older men marry underage girls and force them to have kids.
I wanted to meet my child's father and see where he's been living so that I can complete my own investigation.
About an hour north, there's another closely guarded scene. This one in San Angelo. The hundreds of children who belong to this sect are being housed by the state in a stadium complex. The children were ordered to remain away from the compound by a judge Friday. On Monday, State officials will conduct DNA testing on the kids to clear murky family lines. Experts say this will be followed by individual hearings to decide whether specific families will be reunited.
I hope they've got every DNA lab in the state working on it because I want those results back fast.
Now, there are some young children allowed to stay in this holding center with their parents, but the Associated Press learned today that after the DNA testing is done, those with mothers who are over the age of 18 will be separated from them once they go to foster care. The lawyers say the FLDS members invited them here so they could see for themselves that what the state thinks is an unhealthy situation for youngsters is actually a loving village. John Moe, the Associated Press, San Angelo, Texas.
And when you compare that to what is happening routinely in the Muslim world, the mainstream media has the opposite response. And this is the most benign case of real extremism in the Muslim world. I mean, it's in truth, it's not even extreme, but the extremism in the Muslim world, you have to add to that the clitorectomies that would have been performed on these girls, the fact that they were raising their sons to be suicide bombers, right? And there was an explicit indoctrination of martyrdom, and they were exporting terrorism to the capitals of Europe and America. That's how the fundamentalist Mormon cult would have to behave to make it an analogous situation. And no one can see it on the left.